Know your place, you old parasite. My daughter-in-law screamed as she smashed the top tier of the wedding cake into my face before 180 guests. Frosting ran down my suit, while my son grabbed the microphone and said, "Dad, don't ruin our wedding anymore." I didn't argue. I calmly wiped my face, reached into my jacket, and stared at the phone number I'd saved for 3 months. 30 seconds later, I made one call. By midnight, they were both on their knees, begging, "This story won't leave you unchanged." Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever stood your ground when someone underestimated you? Yes or no is enough. Your voice truly matters here. Quick note, some details are fictionalized to strengthen the lesson, but the message about dignity is what I hope stays with you. At my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law smashed a cake into my face and called me a parasite who contributed nothing. I sat at table 9 in the back corner of the banquet room, the kind of corner where they put people they don't want seen. Leonie Caldwell, 27 years old, a real estate marketing specialist in an expensive white gown, walked toward me carrying the top tier of the wedding cake. 180 guests turned to watch. She stopped 3 feet from my chair and looked down at me with the confidence of someone who had no idea what she was about to lose. "Know your place, you old parasite," she said. Her voice carried across the room. "You haven't contributed anything except making us lose face." She lifted the cake with both hands and pushed it into my face. Hard. White cream and vanilla frosting filled my mouth and nose. I tasted sugar and butter and humiliation. The cake was expensive. I could tell by the taste. Imported vanilla. Real buttercream. The kind of cake you buy when someone else is paying. I didn't move. I sat perfectly still as the cream dripped down my cheeks onto my navy suit, the same suit I wore to my own wedding 35 years ago. The fabric was thin now, worn at the elbows, but it was clean. I had ironed it that morning. On the stage, my son Griffin Morgan, 28 years old, the groom in a rented tuxedo, looked at me. Our eyes met for 3 seconds. Then he spoke into the microphone. "Dad," he said, his voice amplified across the banquet room. "Don't ruin our wedding anymore." I didn't answer. I sat there with cake cream running down my collar and thought of one single thing: the real estate agent's phone number was in my contacts. It was time. But let me go back. Let me tell you how the day started. That morning, I woke up at 6 in my rental room in Kyle, Texas. The room was small, 1 bed, 1 desk, 1 chair. I had lived there for 8 months, ever since I sold the house after Ruth died. The rent was $400 a month, utilities included. The landlord, an old man from New Mexico, never asked questions. I took my suit from the closet. Navy blue. The same suit I wore when I married Ruth in 1989. The elbows were shiny from where the shoulders slightly too wide for my frame now. I was smaller than I used to be. 68 years of life does that. From the desk drawer, I pulled out a folded piece of paper, a receipt. I unfolded it carefully, smoothed the creases with my calloused fingers that had welded steel for 40 years on construction sites across Texas. The receipt was dated September 12, 2024. Down payment for residential property, $180,000. Buyer, Eugene Morgan. Property address, Sunnyvale Creek, Dripping Springs, Texas. Real estate agent, Faye Mercer. I folded the receipt and put it in my breast pocket, right next to my heart. I hadn't told my son yet. I thought today was a beautiful day to tell him. Before I left, I did something I hadn't done in months. I picked up Ruth's old phone, an ancient flip phone from 2018 that I kept charged in the drawer. I opened her last voice message recorded 2 years ago when she was in the hospital at Austin Regional Medical Center 3 days before she died. Her voice came through the tinny speaker, weak but clear. "Eugene," she said. I thought of Ruth's last message, her voice weak but certain. Her instruction still clear after 2 years, wait for the right moment. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, slow and labored. "And promise me you'll wait," she said. I promise I had told her then. I closed the phone and put it back in the drawer. I thought today might be the right moment. I drove my Ford F-150 down Texas Highway 290 toward Dripping Springs. The truck was a 2009 model dark blue with rust spots on the bed and a crack across the windshield. It ran well. I had maintained it myself for 15 years, oil changes every 3,000 miles, air filter every year, transmission fluid every 30,000. The odometer showed 212,000 miles. I thought about 3 months ago when I signed the escrow contract in Faye Mercer's office. She had asked if I wanted to put Griffin's name on the contract too, since it was a gift for him and his fiancée. I said no, just my name. She printed the papers. I signed. I wrote a check for $180,000, my entire pension, from 40 years of welding saved and invested carefully over 4 decades. Every dollar I had. I didn't tell Griffin. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to see his face when I told him, "Son, I bought you and your wife a house. A real house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage. In the Texas Hill Country where you always wanted to live." I arrived at Sage Creek Ranch at 11:30 in the morning. The venue was beautiful, a modern barn with glass walls overlooking the hills, surrounded by live oak trees and limestone pathways. The parking lot was full of luxury vehicles, Mercedes SUVs, BMW sedans, Tesla Model X. I parked my truck in the far corner away from the entrance where it wouldn't embarrass anyone. At the main entrance, a man in his mid-30s wearing a black suit and earpiece stopped me. Derek Shaw, according to his name tag. Venue host. "Name how?" he asked. "Eugene Morgan," I said. "Father of the groom." He checked his tablet, then looked up at me with an uncomfortable expression. "Mr. Morgan?" he said carefully. "You are assigned to the side entrance through the kitchen." It was a request from the bride's family. I looked at him. He looked away. I understand," I said. "Which way?" He pointed to a pathway that curved around the building past the dumpsters and service vehicles. "Thank you," I said. I walked. The smell of food from the kitchen wafted out as I approached roasted meat, garlic, something sweet. It mixed with the scent of jasmine planted along the pathway and the cedar trees beyond. I thought fine. I had walked through back doors for 40 years of work. Service entrances to construction sites, freight elevators, employee parking lots. One more time was okay, but in my breast pocket, pressed against my heart, was a piece of paper they knew nothing about. $180,000, the house they were celebrating. I didn't know yet that in 6 hours I would make one phone call that would take it all away. I walked through the kitchen and into the banquet room. The space opened before me, white orchids cascading from the ceiling, crystal chandeliers catching the afternoon light, round tables draped in ivory linen. Everything glittered. Everything was perfect. But my name wasn't supposed to be seen. I scanned the tables looking for my seat assignment. Each table had name cards in elegant calligraphy embossed on cream cardstock placed in small silver holders. I walked past table 1 near the stage, the bride's family table. Past table 2. Past table 3. I kept walking. The tables got farther from the stage, farther from the dance floor, farther from the center of attention. Table 9 was in the far back corner, tucked behind a limestone pillar, directly beside the kitchen door, the same door I'd just walked through. I found my card. It was handwritten in ballpoint pen. Blue ink. The letters were rushed, uneven. I touched the edge of the card with my finger. The ink smeared slightly. Still wet. Every other card in the room was printed calligraphy. Mine was added at the last second. I pulled out the chair and sat down. From this angle I could barely see the stage. The pillar blocked most of my view, but I could see table 1 clearly, the bride's family table closest to the stage, positioned in the place of honor. That's where I saw Walter. Walter Hewitt, 65 years old. My friend from college, a retired attorney with silver hair and a quiet dignity that came from 40 years of contract law. He sat at table 1 in a charcoal suit, holding a glass of water, looking perfectly comfortable among the bride's family. Our eyes met across the room. He nodded once. Small, subtle, just enough. I nodded back. He was here. That was all I needed to know. 3 months ago, Walter had reviewed every page of the escrow contract in his Austin office. He'd made sure it was airtight. He'd asked me 3 times if I was certain. "Are you sure you don't want to tell Griffin first?" Walter had asked. "I want it to be a surprise," I'd said. Walter had looked at me for a long moment, then signed as witness. Now he sat at table 1, and I sat at table 9, and between us was the entire width of the banquet room. I wondered if anyone else noticed the geography of it. I wondered if anyone else saw what I was seeing, that I had been placed as far from the celebration as possible while still technically being present. I stood up. I needed to find the photographer. If I was going to be here, I wanted at least one picture with my son on his wedding day. One photograph to prove I existed. I found her in the hallway near the photo staging area. She was in her early 40s, professional and efficient, with 2 camera bodies hanging from her neck and a clipboard in her hand. Rachel Preston, according to the lanyard around her neck. Wedding photographer. Her equipment looked expensive, the kind of cameras that cost more than my truck. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm Eugene Morgan, the groom's father. When are the family photos?" She looked up from her clipboard with a polite smile. Then she looked down at her list. The smile faded. "Morgan," she said quietly, scanning the page. "Eugene Morgan." She flipped to the second page, then back to the first. Her expression became uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said. "Your name isn't on the family photo list, sir." I stared at her. "What do you mean, not on the list? I'm the groom's father." "The list was created by the bride," Rachel said carefully. She held the clipboard so I could see it, not because she wanted to, but because she could tell I wouldn't believe her otherwise. I looked at the list. Bride's family 8 names. Groom's family 1 name. Griffin Morgan. Not the groom's father, just the groom. "There must be a mistake," I said. Rachel pointed to a handwritten note in the margin. I leaned closer to read it. "Per bride's request. Father excluded. Too uncomfortable in front of the lens." I read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. Have you ever watched yourself being erased in real time? One small decision at a time. A handwritten card with wet ink. A table behind a pillar. A side entrance through the kitchen. And now this removed from the family photographs on my son's wedding day, because someone decided, someone wrote it down, made it official, that I would be uncomfortable. "I'm very sorry," Rachel said quietly. There was genuine sympathy in her voice. She'd probably seen family drama before, but this seemed to surprise even her. "It's not your fault," I said. I walked back toward the banquet room. My hands were steady. My face was calm. But inside, something was shifting. The handwritten card made sense now. The side entrance made sense. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't oversight. This was a plan. Someone had spent hours, maybe days, planning my invisibility. I thought about the note in the margin. Too uncomfortable in front of the lens. I had stood on scaffolding 40 feet in the air for 40 years, welding steel beams in 105-degree Texas summers, never once looking down, never once showing fear. I had built the frames of shopping malls and hospitals and schools across 3 counties. But today at my son's wedding, I was too uncomfortable for a family photograph. I stopped in the hallway. Through the open door of the banquet room, I could see table 9 in the back corner. I could see the handwritten card still sitting there in its silver holder, the ink probably dry by now. I could see Walter at table 1 turned slightly in his chair watching. I touched the breast pocket of my jacket. The receipt was still there, folded, carefully pressed against my heart. $180,000. The house they would celebrate tonight. The house they thought they'd saved for. The house they thought was theirs. I looked at the photographer's clipboard one more time, at the handwritten note in the margin. Per bride's request. Father excluded. I thought about the wet ink on my name card at table 9. I thought about the side door I'd walked through. Someone had spent considerable effort on this. The question was no longer if they wanted me gone. The question was, who gave the final order? I would find out sooner than I expected. I walked down the hallway looking for answers. The question of who had orchestrated my erasure hung in my mind like smoke. Then I heard her voice. It carried through the bride's waiting room door, clear and confident, the kind of voice that fills a room with certainty. The door sat slightly ajar. I could see slices of white dress, flashes of movement, the glint of mirrors and makeup lights. "From that house on Sunnyvale Creek," Leonie said, her voice bright with pride. "We bought it ourselves. I saved for 2 years. Griffin saved. It's our house. We owe no one." I stopped walking. My hand found the door frame. The wood was smooth and cool under my palm. A woman's voice, one of the bridesmaids, gasped with admiration. "Oh my God, Leonie, that's incredible. You did that all by yourself." "Why, we did," Leonie said. I could hear the smile in her voice. "No help from anyone. No loans. No handouts. Just us. Just our work." Another voice chimed in. "Girl, you are goals. Seriously, buying a house at 27 while planning a wedding, you're unstoppable." Leonie laughed. "You just have to be disciplined. You have to save. You have to know what you want and not let anyone hold you back." I stood in the hallway with my hand on the doorframe listening. "We owe no one." I repeated the words in my head. I thought about September 12th, the escrow office, my name on the buyer line, $180,000. Everything. I had thought, this is what fathers do. This is what you do when you love your son. You give him the foundation. You give him the house. You give him the future. We owe no one. 4 words that erased 30 years of work. 4 words that turned everything I'd saved into nothing. 4 words that made my sacrifice invisible. I took my hand off the doorframe. My fingers left no mark on the polished wood. I walked away from the bride's room, leaving her voice behind me, still talking about her independence, her discipline, her success. The hallway opened into a wider space near the ceremony room entrance. The floor was polished concrete, smooth as glass, reflecting the afternoon light from the tall windows. I saw my son. Griffin stood near the heavy cedar doors that led into the ceremony room. He wore a vintage tuxedo, charcoal gray, with narrow lapels borrowed from someone in the bride's family, because we hadn't had money for rentals. He looked nervous. His hands kept adjusting his bow tie, smoothing his jacket, touching his hair. Our eyes met across 20 feet of polished floor. He saw me. I know he saw me. I watched his eyes take in the whole picture, his father standing alone in the hallway, wearing a 35-year-old suit that was too big in the shoulders, now excluded from the family photos, sitting at table 9 behind a pillar. His mouth opened, just slightly, like he was about to say something. I waited. For a moment I thought he would walk toward me. I thought he would cross that distance and ask me why I was alone. I thought he would notice that something was wrong. I thought he would be my son, but then a voice called out from the other direction. "Griffin, time to line up. We're starting in 5 minutes. On says." One of the bridesmaids. I recognized her voice from the bride's room. She appeared at the far end of the hallway, waving urgently. Griffin looked at her, then back at me. I waited. When does a son stop being your son? Is it a single moment, one clear breaking point? Or is it 100 small choices, each one moving him a little farther away until the distance becomes impossible to cross? Griffin's mouth closed. He didn't speak. He didn't wave. He didn't move toward me. He turned away. He walked to the heavy cedar door, pulled it open, and stepped through. The bridesmaid followed him. The door swung closed behind them with a solid final sound that echoed down the empty hallway. I stood there, alone. The light from the tall windows made long rectangles on the polished floor. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear music starting the soft prelude that meant the ceremony was about to begin. I could hear voices murmuring, chairs creaking, the rustling sound of a crowd settling into place. I looked at the closed cedar door. I thought about Griffin's eyes meeting mine. I thought about the moment when he had opened his mouth, when I had thought he might speak, might notice, might care. And then I thought about him turning away, choosing to turn away. I had taught my son to read when he was 4 years old. I had sat with him at our kitchen table every evening after work, still smelling of welding smoke, and we had sounded out words together. I had taught him to ride a bike, running beside him on our street and Kyle one hand on the seat to keep him steady until he found his balance. I had taught him to change a tire, to check oil, to shake hands firmly, to look people in the eye, to tell the truth. I had taught him for 28 years. And what he had learned, what he had chosen to learn today, was how to see his father and walk away. The cedar door stayed closed. The hallway stayed empty. The music grew louder, signaling that guests should take their seats. I touched the breast pocket of my jacket one more time. The receipt was still there. The proof was still there. But standing in that empty hallway, watching the door that had closed between us, I asked myself, what had I taught my son that prepared him to walk away? What had I done wrong that made it so easy for him to choose her family over mine? I didn't have an answer, not yet, but I would find one during the ceremony. I would learn exactly what my son had become, and exactly what my sacrifice had bought. I didn't know what I'd taught my son wrong, but first I had to watch him get married. I walked into the ceremony room and took a seat in the last row. High ceiling with exposed beams, glass walls looking out at the hills, white chairs with lavender ribbons. An archway of white roses stood at the front against the December landscape. The music changed. The processional began. I sat in the last row and watched my son promise his life to someone who had already tried to erase mine. Griffin stood at the front in his borrowed tuxedo, hands clasped, face nervous and hopeful. When Leonie appeared, everyone stood. I stood too. I watched them meet at the altar. I watched the officiant speak about love and commitment and partnership. Then Griffin began to read his vows. I recognized that voice, the cadence, the way he paused between phrases, the confidence in his pronunciation. That was the voice of the child I had taught to read on our back porch in Kyle when he was 4 years old, sitting together in the evening heat with picture books spread across the wooden table. I promise to be your partner. Griffin read, in all of life's adventures, to support your dreams, to build our future together. Every word perfect, every pause deliberate. I had taught him that. I had taught him to sound out words, to speak them with intention. Now he stood at the front of this room, using the voice I had given him, promising to build a future in a house I had bought with a woman who had told her friends she owed no one. The ceremony ended. Everyone applauded. Griffin and Leonie walked back down the aisle together, smiling. As they passed the last row, Leonie's eyes swept over me for just a second, blank recognition, as if I were a piece of furniture. The guests filed out toward the cocktail area. I waited, then followed. The cocktail hour was set up in an outdoor courtyard with string lights and round tables on limestone pavers. A bar served champagne. Servers circulated with trays of food. I walked to the head table and took the envelope from my inner pocket. Not the receipt, the other envelope. $2,000 cash inside. Everything I had left. Everything. I placed it carefully on the table next to the floral arrangement. "Excuse me, sir." I turned. A young woman in a lavender bridesmaid dress approached. Claire Caldwell, late 20s, Leonie's younger sister. She had the same sharp features. "That's a gift envelope," I said. "Yes, I see that." She picked it up, examining it. No bank logo, no wire transfer confirmation. Just a white envelope. "I'm sorry, sir, but the family doesn't accept cash gifts. They only accept transfers or items from the registry." She held the envelope out to me. I looked at her. I looked at the envelope. I looked at the head table with its expensive flowers. "And I'm the groom's father," I said. I understand," Claire said, perfectly polite. "But those are the family guidelines. For tracking purposes. I'm sure you understand. For tracking purposes." I took the envelope back. $2,000. Claire smiled and walked away. I stood there holding the returned gift. $2,000, the last money I had. I put it back in my pocket right next to the receipt for the house. Two things in the same pocket. Now $2,000 they wouldn't accept, and $180,000 they didn't even know existed. I stood at table 9 and watched the party continue. Guests laughed. Music played softly. Servers moved through the tables, pouring Bordeaux into crystal glasses. The reception was entering its peak hour. The toasts would come soon, followed by the cake cutting. Before then, I needed to act. I stood up. I needed air. I needed to think clearly. Eugene! Walter Hewitt appeared beside my table. He pulled out the chair next to mine and sat down. His voice was low. Are you okay? I didn't answer that question. Instead, I asked him something else. Is the contract still in my name? I said quietly. Can it still be canceled? Walter looked at me for a long moment. His face was serious, careful. He understood what I was really asking. Until you sign the transfer? He said barely above a whisper. The property remains in your sole name. No version of a transfer document has been signed. No transfer has been initiated. Legally, that house belongs entirely to you. I nodded slowly. Can I cancel the purchase? You have a 72-hour cancellation clause, Walter said. Standard for contracts over $100,000. You have until 11:59 p.m. on December 16th, Monday. If you want to cancel, all you need to do is notify the agent in writing. Thank you, I said. Walter sat there for another moment, studying my face. Eugene, he said carefully, are you thinking about... I'm not thinking about anything, I said. I'm just asking. Walter nodded. He understood. He'd known me for 40 years. He'd reviewed that contract 3 months ago and asked me 3 times if I was sure. Now he was asking me a different question without saying the words. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked away. I looked toward the head table where Leonie was standing now, raising a glass of champagne, smiling radiantly at the guests. She was celebrating a house she thought was hers. A house she'd told her bridesmaids she'd bought herself. A house built on my money and my silence. I touched the pocket of my jacket. The receipt was there, next to the returned envelope. $180,000 in paper. $2,000 in cash, both invisible to everyone here. I thought of Walter's words. It's all in your name. I thought of Ruth's voice from this morning. Don't tell the truth too soon. Wait for the right moment. I wondered how long I would have to wait. I didn't have to wait long. She appeared at my table 5 minutes after Walter left. Marlene Caldwell, the bride's mother, mid-50s, wearing a silk dress the color of champagne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She wore her authority like expensive perfume, and she was coming to tell me exactly where I belonged in my son's new life. Eugene, she said, her smile bright and rehearsed. May I sit? She didn't wait for an answer. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, smoothing her dress, arranging herself with the precision of someone who had practiced this conversation. I wanted to have a little chat, she said. Just the two of us, father to mother. I nodded. I didn't speak. I learned a long time ago that people tell you everything you need to know if you just let them talk. It's such a beautiful day, Marlene said. Griffin and Leonie are so happy. We're so grateful everyone could be here. She paused, waiting for me to respond. I didn't. You know, she continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. It's so important for young couples to have their independence, to build their life together without interference. Leonie and Griffin are very capable, Marlene said. They've worked so hard. They've saved. They've made such smart decisions about their future. The house, for example. Did Griffin tell you about the house? I heard what I said. They did that all by themselves, Marlene said, pride filling her voice. No help, no loans, just good planning and discipline. That's the kind of independence we want to encourage. I looked at her. Her eyes were warm but calculating, like someone closing a business deal while pretending to be your friend. What I'm trying to say, Eugene, is that it's so important not to interfere in their financial decisions. not to create pressure, not to make them feel like they owe anyone anything. They're adults now. They can take care of themselves. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to something more intimate, more pointed. We want you to enjoy your retirement, she said. Not worry about adding anything to their life. They have everything they need. The best thing we can do as parents is step back and let them thrive. Step back! Don't interfere. Don't add anything. I sat there listening to her tell me not to help my son while wearing a dress that cost more than I made in a month when I was welding. I sat there listening to her praise their independence while they celebrated in a house I had bought with every penny I'd saved over 40 years. Don't interfere in their financial decisions. $180,000. Quite the interference. Marlene sat back satisfied. She had delivered her message. She had set the boundaries. She had put me in my place. I'm so glad we could have this talk, she said, standing up. I think it's important that we're all on the same page. For Griffin and Leonie's sake. Thank you, I said. It was all I said. 2 words. She smiled, patted my shoulder like I was a child who had finally understood the lesson, and walked away. I sat at table 9 and watched her rejoin her family at table 1. I watched her lean over and whisper something to her husband, Brent Caldwell, who nodded and glanced briefly in my direction. The message had been delivered. Dinner service began. Servers brought plates of food, grilled beef tenderloin, roasted vegetables, garlic mashed potatoes. The food was excellent, probably expensive. I ate slowly, cutting the meat into small pieces, chewing carefully, and I watched Leonie move through the banquet room like she was running a campaign. She stopped at table 2, then table 3, then table 4. At each stop, she told the same story, her voice bright and confident, carrying clearly across the room even over the music and conversation. 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage, I heard her say at table 5. We decorated it ourselves. We didn't ask anyone for help. Table 6. It's in the hill country. Beautiful views. We saved for 2 years. Table 7. The best part is knowing we did it on our own. No handouts. Just us. Have you ever been told not to add anything to someone's life after you've already given them everything you had? I cut another piece of beef. It was tender, cooked perfectly. I could taste the seasoning, the char from the grill. I chewed slowly. An elderly man at the next table leaned toward me. Harold Bennett, probably mid-70s, wearing a suit that had seen better days. One of the few guests who looked like he belonged at table 9 with me. You're the groom's father, aren't you? He asked. Yeah, I said. Your son is a lucky young man, Harold said, smiling. His wife takes such good care of the family. I heard they just bought a house, all by themselves. That's impressive these days. Yes, I said. I heard. I didn't just hear. I signed the check. September 12th, 2024. A Tuesday morning. I had written it out carefully, my hand steady, my handwriting neat, despite the calluses on my fingers from 40 years of holding welding torches and steel tools. $180,000 and 0 hundredths. My hands had still smelled like machine oil that morning. The day before, I'd spent 6 hours helping my neighbor fix his car lying on his driveway, my back against the concrete, working on the chassis. The oil had gotten into the creases of my palms under my fingernails. I'd scrubbed them that night, but the smell lingered. Machine oil and ink. That's what my hands smelled like when I signed away everything I had. I cut another piece of beef and thought about my hands 30 years ago, holding the welding torch in the Texas summer sun building frames for shopping malls and hospitals and schools. Building things that would last. Building things for people who knew my name back then. People who remembered I existed. I heard, I said again to Harold, and I wondered how much longer I could sit here listening to them celebrate with my money while telling me to stay away. The answer came sooner than I expected. She appeared at my table carrying a champagne glass, her white dress catching the light from the chandeliers. She brought me champagne like a peace offering, but her eyes were measuring how much space I would take up in their future. Dad. Leonie said, her voice sweet and concerned. Are you okay sitting back here? I looked up at her. She stood beside my chair, holding the champagne glass delicately, her smile practiced and perfect. This place is quieter, she continued. Away from all the noise. You're old. Noise isn't good at your age. Old. She said it casually, like stating a fact, like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. I was 68. I'm fine, I said. She set the champagne glass on the table in front of me, then pulled out the chair beside mine and sat down. Close. Too close. Like she was talking to a child or someone hard of hearing. I just wanted to check on you, she said. Make sure you're comfortable. I know today has been a lot. All these people. All this excitement. She glanced around the banquet room, then back at me. Don't worry about me and Griffin at all, she said. Her voice dropped lower, more intimate, like she was sharing a secret. We can take care of everything. We want you to enjoy your retirement, your old age. Just relax. Don't try to add anything else to our life. We have everything we need. Don't try to add anything else. I looked down at my hands. 40 years of welding had left their mark on every knuckle. These same hands had signed that check. Don't try to add anything else. I thought of the receipt in my pocket. I thought try was a strange word to describe 30 years of sacrifice. I don't plan to add anything else, I said quietly. Don't worry. Leonie smiled, satisfied. She patted my arm like I was a good dog who had finally learned to stay. I'm so glad we understand each other, she said. She stood up, smoothing her dress. Enjoy the champagne. We'll talk soon. Maybe in a few months, when things settle down. She walked away, her heels clicking on the polished floor, returning to the center of the room where her friends waited. I sat at table 9 alone, looking at the champagne glass she'd left. I didn't drink it, and suddenly, without warning, I was somewhere else. Not at the wedding, not at table 9. I was in a hospital room. Austin Regional Medical Center. Room 412. 2 years ago. May 2022. The room had yellow light from the afternoon sun coming through the window. It smelled like antiseptic and something sweet and sickly that I later learned was the smell of dying. Ruth lay in the bed, small under the white sheets, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. She had asked me to come close. I had pulled the chair up beside the bed and held her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the room. Do you think Griffin will be okay? She had asked. Her voice was weak but clear. He'll be fine, I had said. He needs a solid footing, Ruth said. A real house, not an apartment, not a rental, something permanent, something that says you belong here. And don't you worry, I had told her. I will take care of him, I promise. She had looked at me with those knowing eyes, the same eyes that had seen through my excuses and my pride for 35 years of marriage. But Eugene, she said slowly, each word deliberate. If he is not grateful, don't tell the truth too soon. Wait for the right moment. I hadn't understood what she meant. Not fully. I thought she was worried about money, about timing, about logistics. I'll wait, I had promised. She had closed her eyes then, satisfied. 3 days later, she was gone. Memory is a double-edged sword. It gives you warmth in a cold room, but it also sharpens the edges of the betrayal you're currently enduring. I was back at table 9 now. The hospital room faded. The yellow light disappeared. I was looking at the champagne glass Leonie had left at the bubbles rising slowly to the surface. Ruth had known. She had recorded those words 2 years ago in a hospital bed, and somehow she had already seen this day coming. I looked at my watch. 4:37 p.m. I had waited. For 3 months since signing the escrow contract in Faye Mercer's office, writing that check with my scarred welder's hands. All day today, watching them celebrate a house they thought was theirs. Watching them erase me from photos, from tables, from their future. Listening to Leonie tell her friends she owed no one. Listening to Marlene tell me not to interfere. Listening to Leonie just now tell me not to try to add anything else. I had waited. Ruth's voice echoed in my memory, wait for the right moment. I touched the breast pocket of my jacket. The receipt was there. The proof was there. $180,000. Sole buyer Eugene Morgan. Property Sunnyvale Creek, Dripping Springs, Texas. I looked around the banquet room. Griffin was at the head table laughing with his new wife. The bride's family surrounded them celebrating. Music played. Champagne flowed. Everything was perfect. Except I was sitting alone at table 9 behind a pillar near the kitchen door, holding a secret that could destroy this perfect picture in a single phone call. I wondered, when is the right moment? I didn't know yet that I only had 2 hours left to wait. The right moment was approaching faster than I realized. 20 minutes after Leonie left my table, the music lowered. The DJ's voice came through the speakers, asking everyone to direct their attention to the stage. Griffin was standing there, microphone in hand, ready to give his thank you speech. My son took the microphone to thank the people who made his life possible, and I counted how many times he didn't say my name. He stood on the small stage in his charcoal tuxedo, looking confident and happy. The spotlight caught him perfectly. He looked like he belonged there, like he'd been born for this moment. I just want to take a minute. Griffin said, his voice clear and strong through the speakers, to thank everyone who made today possible. I sat at table 9, my hands folded on the white tablecloth, listening. First, I want to thank my parents-in-law, Griffin said, gesturing toward a table 1 where Marlene and Brent Caldwell sat, beaming. Thank you for raising such an incredible daughter. Thank you for welcoming me into your family. Applause. I didn't clap yet. I was counting. I want to thank my siblings-in-law, Griffin continued. Claire, thank you for being the best sister Leonie could ask for and the best sister-in-law to me. More applause. I want to thank our friends, Griffin said. Everyone who came from Austin, from Houston, from San Antonio. Everyone who took time out of their lives to be here today. He paused, looking around the room. His eyes swept past table 9. Past me. He didn't stop. And especially, Griffin said, his voice taking on a deeper emotion. I want to thank my wife and her family for creating the conditions for us to have everything today. The house, the future, everything we've worked for. We couldn't have done it without you. The conditions for us to have everything. Everyone stood and applauded. I stood too. My hands came together mechanically. Clap, clap, clap. The sound of my palms meeting felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I looked at Griffin's tuxedo, the navy one with the narrow lapels. I remembered saving for 3 months to buy him that suit when he turned 18. He'd needed it for his high school graduation. We didn't have much money then. Ruth was already getting sick, though we didn't know it yet. I'd taken extra welding jobs on weekends, small repairs for neighbors, anything to save enough for a good suit. I clapped for my son, who thanked everyone except me. I clapped. Griffin raised his glass. Everyone raised theirs. I picked up the champagne Leonie had left at my table. We all drank together. Then the music started again, and people returned to their conversations. And Griffin stepped down from the stage into the arms of his new family. I set down my glass. I needed to move. I needed air. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't table 9. I walked toward the restrooms at the back of the venue. The hallway was quieter, the music muffled. I pushed open the heavy door to the men's room. The space was empty. Or so I thought. I walked to one of the stalls, pushed the door open, stepped inside. As I closed the door, I heard voices from the other side of the partition. 2 men talking by the sinks. The timing worked out perfectly, one voice said. I recognized it immediately. Brent Caldwell, Leonie's father. 68 years old, a commercial property investor who wore expensive suits and drove a Mercedes. After the honeymoon, Brent continued. We urge Griffin to sign the transfer deed. Add both their names to the property. Joint ownership. That's the key. Why does that matter? Another male voice asked. Younger. Maybe Brent's brother-in-law. Because we need that asset as collateral for the business loan, Brent said. His voice was casual, like he was discussing the weather. "The commercial property deal in Round Rock. We're short on collateral. The bank wants more security. A residential property in the hill country fully paid. That's exactly what we need." I stood frozen in the stall. My hand slowly found the breast pocket of my jacket. I pressed my palm against the paper folded there. "Does Griffin know about this?" the younger voice asked. "Hi, he doesn't need to know," Brent said. I heard water running, the sound of hands being washed. "He'll sign whatever Leonie asks him to sign. The little one is good at convincing. She's got him wrapped around her finger." The little one is good at convincing. Those words hung in the air like poison gas. "And if he asks questions," the younger voice said. "He won't," Brent said. "He's grateful. That's the whole point. Make them feel like they did it themselves, make them feel proud, and they'll do anything you ask. It's not complicated." I heard the paper towel dispenser. Footsteps toward the door. "Nah, just make sure no one mentions the collateral part to Griffin or the old man," Brent said. "Let them think it's about love and independence. Let them think they're special." The door opened, closed. The voices disappeared. I stood in the restroom stall, hand pressed against the receipt in my breast pocket. The white brick wall in front of me was clean, well lit, completely ordinary. But everything else had changed. They weren't just erasing me from the wedding. They weren't just taking credit for my gift. They were planning to use my entire life savings, my 30 years of pension, every dollar I'd saved as collateral for a business loan. A loan I knew nothing about. A loan for their commercial property deal. Their risk. Their venture. My money. The little one is good at convincing. I thought of Leonie circulating through the banquet room, telling everyone how independent they were. I thought of Marlene telling me not to interfere in their financial decisions. I thought of Griffin's speech thanking everyone except the person who had actually made it all possible. And I finally understood. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This was a plan. A deliberate, calculated plan to take my money and use it for their purposes while keeping me invisible, grateful, and silent. I finally understood when the right moment was. It was now. I walked out of the restroom with purpose I hadn't felt in hours. The hallway stretched before me, polished concrete floor, reflecting the soft lights, the muffled sound of music and conversation coming from the banquet room ahead. I walked steadily, my footsteps measured, deliberate. Then I saw Walter. He was coming from the opposite direction, walking toward the restrooms. We were on a collision course. But neither of us slowed. Neither of us stopped. We passed each other in the hallway like strangers, but his two raised fingers told me everything I needed to know. Our eyes met as we crossed paths, just for a second. But that second was enough. Walter had known me for 40 years. He'd reviewed that escrow contract 3 months ago. He'd sat at table 1 all day watching them celebrate. He'd watched them exclude me from photos, from speeches, from everything. And now in the hallway passing me like we barely knew each other. He looked into my eyes and understood exactly what I'd discovered in that restroom. His right hand came up briefly at his side. 2 fingers. Quick. Subtle. The signal we'd used since college when we played pickup basketball, and someone needed to know I'm open. "I'm ready. Pass the ball." "Ready?" I nodded once, so slight that anyone watching would have missed it. Just a tiny movement of my head. We passed each other. Walter continued toward the restrooms. I continued toward the banquet room. Neither of us looked back. I walked through the doorway into the noise and light. The party was in full swing now. Guests were laughing, drinking, dancing. The energy had shifted from formal ceremony to celebration. Someone had dimmed the lights slightly. The chandeliers glowed softer. Music pulsed from the speakers. I walked to table 9 and sat down. My chair was still there in the corner behind the pillar near the kitchen door. I pulled it out and lowered myself into it, slowly feeling every one of my 68 years in my back, my knees, my shoulders. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I set it deliberately on the white tablecloth in front of me. The black screen stared back at me like a mirror. I looked at it for a long moment. Inside that phone in the contacts was Faye Mercer's number. The real estate agent. The woman who had sold me the house 3 months ago. The woman who had asked if I wanted to put Griffin's name on the contract too, and I had said no, just mine. 3 months I'd carried that number. 3 months I'd waited. How much longer? The music changed. A fanfare of horns. The DJ's voice came through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, the wedding cake. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Guests turned toward the center of the room, where servers were wheeling out a massive 5-tier cake on a silver cart. White frosting, perfect layers, sugar flowers cascading down the sides. It was beautiful. Expensive. The kind of cake you see in magazines. The wedding cake was a white tower of pretense, 5 tiers of frosting hiding the rot underneath. Leonie moved to stand beside it, Griffin joining her. Someone handed her an ornate silver knife. She positioned herself perfectly for the photographer, turning to smile at the crowd with that practiced bride radiance I'd watched her perform all day. Her eyes swept across the banquet room, a theatrical arc taking in all the guests, all the tables, all the celebration. The smile never wavered. Then her gaze landed on table 9, on me. 1 second of direct eye contact across 50 feet of banquet room. Her smile stayed fixed. Her hand stayed on the knife, but her eyes locked onto mine with sudden sharp focus. I looked straight back. I didn't blink. I didn't look down. I didn't look away. For 1 second we saw each other clearly, and in that second, something shifted in her face. Not in her smile that stayed perfect camera ready, but in her eyes, in the set of her jaw, in the tiny tension that appeared at her temples. I recognized that look. I'd seen it before on construction sites when someone decided they'd had enough of being patient. When a foreman finally confronted a lazy worker. When a welder decided to quit after being pushed too far. When someone made a decision to stop holding back and do what they'd been thinking about for hours. Not contempt, not anger. A decision. Someone about to do something they've been building toward all day. Leonie turned back to the photographer, still smiling. Griffin leaned in beside her. They posed with their hands on the knife together, cutting into the bottom tier. Camera flashes lit them up like stars. Everyone clapped and cheered, but I'd seen her eyes. I looked down at my phone on the white tablecloth. Still there. Still dark. Waiting. I thought about the restroom. About Brent Caldwell's casual voice discussing collateral and business loans. About his comment, "The little one is good at convincing." I thought about Leonie circulating through the room all afternoon, telling everyone how independent they were, how they'd done everything themselves, how they owed no one. I thought about Griffin's speech thanking everyone except me. I thought about Marlene warning me not to interfere. I thought about Claire returning my cash envelope. I thought about everything that had happened since I walked through that side door this morning. All of it had been deliberate. She was about to do something. I could feel it coming like a storm building on the horizon. That tension in the air before lightning strikes. That pressure before thunder. I'd seen enough people in 40 years to recognize the signs. When someone stops calculating and starts acting. When patience runs out and confrontation begins. I watched Leonie feed Griffin a piece of cake. He fed her a piece back. Everyone laughed and cheered. Perfect. Lovely. Beautiful. But I knew she'd made a decision when our eyes met. She'd seen me sitting there at table 9, still present, still watching, still existing when she wanted me gone. And she'd decided to do something about it. I didn't know I had less than 20 minutes before everything changed. 20 minutes became 10. 10 became 5. I was still sitting at table 9 when she came for me. She didn't come alone this time, and the phones pointed at me told me this humiliation was meant to be recorded. Leonie walked toward my table with purpose, her white dress catching the light. 3 of her bridesmaids flanking her like an entourage. Claire was there. 2 others I didn't know. All 3 of them held their phones up, cameras pointed directly at me recording. I set down my water glass slowly, carefully. The way you put down a tool when you know you'll need steady hands for what comes next. Leonie stopped in front of my table. Close. Too close. The way you stand when you want everyone nearby to hear what you're saying. Her voice was loud, not shouting but projected, performed, pitched perfectly for the tables around us to hear clearly. She said, that false sweetness coating every word. Actually, you don't need to be here. You're old. This party isn't for you. I looked up at her. Behind her, I could see 3 phone cameras recording, watching, waiting. Can you ask a neighbor to take you home early? Lanny continued, her smile sharp and bright. We'll visit you at the weekend. Maybe. The tables around us had gone quiet. People were listening, watching. Some were pulling out their own phones. I looked directly at her. I don't need anyone to take me home, I said. My voice was calm, clear. I drive myself. I've driven myself all my life. Lanny's smile tightened, just slightly. Just enough that I could see the mask slip for a fraction of a second. She turned sharply. Her bridesmaids followed, the phones still recording, and she walked directly toward the 5-tier wedding cake at the center of the room. I watched her go. I knew what was coming. I didn't move. Everything slowed down. Lanny reached the cake. The beautiful 5-tier tower of white fondant and gold leaf decorated with sugar flowers sitting on its silver cart under the chandeliers. The centerpiece of the celebration, the symbol of their perfect day. She reached out with both hands and lifted the top tier. Carefully, deliberately, like picking up something precious. Then she turned and walked back toward me. The banquet room was watching now. All of it. 180 guests. Conversations stopping. Heads turning. Phones rising. Lanny walked across the polished floor, carrying the top tier of her wedding cake, her white dress trailing behind her, her face set with determination. She stopped in front of table 9. She looked down at me, and her voice rose loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Know your place, you old parasite," she shouted. "You haven't contributed anything except making us lose face." She lifted the cake tier higher and smashed it directly into my face. The impact was harder than I expected. The cake tier was dense, heavy. It hit my face like a closed fist. White buttercream exploded across my cheeks, my nose, my forehead. Raspberry filling, I could taste it, sweet and tart, flooded into my mouth. Frosting went up my nose, into my eyes. The sound echoed across the silent room. A wet, heavy thud. I felt the cream drip down my neck. Felt it soak into the collar of my navy suit. The suit I'd worn to my own wedding 35 years ago. The suit I'd ironed this morning. The banquet room was completely silent. 180 people frozen. I didn't move. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't stand up. I just sat there breathing slowly, feeling the weight of the cream pulling down my eyelashes, feeling the sticky sweetness of raspberry filling sliding down my chin onto the white tablecloth. Parasite. The word hung in the silent room. 30 years of welding. 30 years of saving. $180,000. Parasite. Then I heard my son's voice. "Dad!" I looked up. Through the layer of buttercream covering my eyes, I could see Griffin standing at the head table, looking at me. His face was pale, shocked, but not for the reason I hoped. "Matty," he said again, his voice small, but carrying in the absolute silence. "Don't ruin our wedding anymore. Don't ruin our wedding." His wife just smashed a cake into my face and called me a parasite in front of 180 people, and he was telling me not to ruin their wedding. I sat still, cake cream on my face, down my neck, down my suit. The suit I'd saved for months to buy him when he was 18. The suit I'd ironed this morning in my small rental room. I didn't wipe the cream away. I didn't stand up. I didn't say a word. I just breathed. In, out, slowly, carefully. The way you breathe when you're welding and you need your hands perfectly steady for a critical join. Leonie stood in front of me, still holding the destroyed cake tier, breathing hard, her face flushed with anger and triumph. Behind her, the bridesmaids still held their phones up, recording everything. The banquet room stayed silent, waiting. And in that silence, in that moment, with cake covering my face and my son's words echoing in my ears. One single thought crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. Faye Mercer's phone number. I'd saved it 3 months ago. September 12th, 2024. The day I signed the escrow contract. The day I wrote the check for $180,000. The day I gave them the house they thought was theirs. The day Faye had asked if I wanted to put Griffin's name on the contract too, and I said no, just mine. Parasite. I sat still with cake cream dripping down my face and thought of one single thing. Faye's phone number was in my contacts. It was time. I stood up slowly. The banquet room was still silent, still watching. 180 pairs of eyes on me waiting to see what the old parasite would do next. I picked up the white cloth napkin from my table. I brought it to my face and began wiping the cake away. Slowly, methodically. One side of my face, then the other. My forehead. My neck. The movements were precise, controlled like tightening bolts on a piece of scaffolding. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't speak. When my face was mostly clean, I folded the napkin carefully and set it on the table. Then I walked toward the side door. The same door I'd entered through this morning. The door near the kitchen. No one stopped me. I pushed through the door into the hallway. The door closed behind me, muffling the music and voices to a distant hum. The hallway was empty. Narrow. A single fluorescent tube overhead flickered with that particular rhythm fluorescent lights have when they're about to die. The light cast uneven shadows on the beige cinder-block walls. At the far end of the hallway, an emergency exit door stood propped open with a rubber wedge. Through the opening, I could see the dark Texas parking lot beyond a slice of December night. I stood under the flickering light and pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. My hands were steady. That surprised me. After everything, after being erased from photos, from speeches, from gratitude, after being told to leave, after having a cake smashed into my face and being called a parasite in front of 180 people, my hands were steady. I looked down at my suit. The navy one. 35 years old. Vanilla frosting still visible on the lapel. A streak of raspberry filling on my tie. I straightened the tie anyway. Force of habit. Behind me through the closed door, I could hear the wedding continuing. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. They'd already moved on. The assault was over. The entertainment had ended. Life continued. I unlocked my phone. The screen glowed in the dim hallway. I opened my contacts. Scrolled down. Not far. I'd saved it near the top. A name I'd looked at every day for 3 months, but never called. Faye Mercer, real estate agent. My thumb hovered over the call button. 5 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I thought about Ruth's voice from this morning. Her last message recorded 2 years ago in a hospital bed. If he is not grateful, don't tell the truth too soon. Wait for the right moment. I thought about Walter's 2 raised fingers in the hallway. Ready. I thought about Brent Caldwell in the restroom discussing collateral and business loans. I thought about Leonie circulating through the room, telling everyone how independent they were. I thought about Griffin's speech thanking everyone except me. I thought about the word parasite. I pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice. "This is Faye," a woman's voice said. Professional. Warm. The voice of someone who'd helped me 3 months ago fill out paperwork for the biggest purchase of my life. "Faye," I said. "This is Eugene Morgan." "Eugene." Her voice brightened. "How are you? How's the wedding going?" I looked down the hallway at the emergency exit at the slice of dark parking lot beyond. "I need to cancel the contract," I said. Silence. "I'm sorry," Faye said carefully. "Cancel which?" "The Sunnyvale Creek property," I said. My voice was calm, clear. "The escrow contract. I want to cancel it. Effective immediately." Another pause. Longer this time. "Eugene," Faye said slowly. "Are you sure that's your retirement property? You described it as your dream, and there is a cancellation fee." "I'm sure," I said. "Can I ask what changed?" she said. Is there a problem with the property? Did the inspection... There's no problem with the property, I said. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Thinking, calculating, trying to understand. John, she said finally, this is a big decision. Maybe we should meet tomorrow. Talk it through. Make sure. I've thought for 30 years, I said. The words came out quietly, simply, but with absolute finality. Faye went silent. I counted 3 seconds of silence. All right, she said at last. Her voice had shifted. Professional now. All business. I'll initiate the cancellation paperwork tonight. You'll need to sign the forms. I can email them to you within the hour. Thank you, I said. The cancellation fee is... I understand, I said, and the deposit will be returned to your account within 3 to 5 business days, Faye continued. All 180,000. Thank you, I said again. Eugene Faye said, her voice softening slightly. I'm sorry it didn't work out. I almost laughed, but I didn't. It worked out exactly as it should have, I said. I ended the call. The phone screen went dark. I stood there holding it for a moment, looking at my reflection in the black glass. My face was clean now mostly. A few streaks of frosting still visible in my hair. My tie was crooked despite my attempt to straighten it. I looked like a man who'd just been assaulted with a wedding cake. I looked like a man who'd just canceled the biggest purchase of his life. I looked like a man who'd just taken back everything they thought was theirs. I put the phone in my pocket. Behind me, through the closed door, the music played on. Someone was laughing. A glass broke, followed by applause. The celebration continued. They knew nothing yet. Griffin didn't know. Leonie didn't know. Marlene and Brent didn't know. The 180 guests didn't know. They were in there celebrating a house that as of this moment no longer existed in the future they'd imagined. I stood in the empty hallway with the phone in my pocket, hearing the banquet room music still playing through the wall. They knew nothing yet. They would know soon enough. I stood in the hallway for 8 minutes. Alone. The fluorescent light continued its uneven flicker. From inside the banquet room, I could hear the celebration continuing music, laughter, the low hum of conversation punctuated by occasional bursts of applause. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. Faye Mercer, calling back. I answered on the first ring. Eugene, Faye said. Her voice was different now, more careful, more formal. I've pulled up the file. I want to confirm a few things before we proceed. Go ahead, I said. The contract includes a standard 72-hour cancellation clause, Faye continued, valid through 11:59 p.m. on Monday, December 16th. Since today is Sunday, December 14th, you are well within the window. Are you aware that this cancellation will be permanent once submitted? That's correct, I said. I said. Eugene Faye said, and her voice softened slightly. I need to ask you this directly. Does your son know about this property? Does anyone else have expectations regarding... Do they have legal rights to it? I interrupted. A pause. No, Faye said finally. No other names appear on the contract. No other parties have legal claim. It's entirely yours to cancel if you choose. I choose, I said. Mauritino, then I need written confirmation. Faye said, back to business. An email is sufficient. I'll need you to state clearly that you're canceling the escrow agreement, reference the contract date, and include your full name. Can you send that within the next hour? I can send it now, I said. All right, Faye said. Once I receive it, the cancellation is official. The deposit will be returned to your account within 3 to 5 business days. Thank you, I said. Eugene, she said one more time. Are you absolutely certain? I am, I said. I ended the call. I opened my email. The screen glowed bright in the dim hallway. I started typing with my thumbs, slow but deliberate. The words came easily. Walter had taught me years ago how to write a legal notice. Keep it simple. State the facts. Sign your name. Subject: cancellation of contract, Sunnyvale Creek property. Dear Ms. Mercer, I hereby confirm cancellation of the escrow agreement dated September 12, 2024, for the property located at Sunnyvale Creek, Dripping Springs, Texas. This cancellation is effective immediately. Eugene Morgan. I read it once, twice, making sure every word was correct, every fact accurate. Then I pressed send. The phone screen showed the spinning circle. Sending, sending, then sent. 6:41 p.m. I stared at the screen for 3 seconds. The word sent sat there simple and final. 2 syllables that changed everything. I put the phone back in my pocket. Then I reached into my breast pocket, the inner one on the left side over my heart, and pulled out the folded piece of paper I'd been carrying all day. The receipt. I unfolded it carefully, smoothing out the creases. Down payment for residential property, $180,000. Date September 12, 2024. Buyer Eugene Morgan. Property Sunnyvale Creek, Dripping Springs, Texas. Agent Faye Mercer. I looked at that number. $180,000. 40 years of welding. Every penny I'd saved. Every dollar I'd invested carefully, conservatively over decades of work. Gone. Not stolen, not lost, given, and now taken back. I refolded the receipt and returned it to my breast pocket. Right over my heart, where it had been all day. I turned toward the emergency exit at the end of the hallway. The door was still propped open with the rubber wedge. Through the opening, I could see my truck in the dark parking lot. The 2009 Ford F-150, dark blue. Rust spots, crack in the windshield. I could walk out that door right now, get in my truck, drive away, leave them all here celebrating. Let them discover tomorrow or the day after or next week that the house they thought was theirs had never actually belonged to them. I started walking toward the exit. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The cool night air from outside reached me. It smelled different from the banquet room. No flowers, no perfume, no champagne. Just Texas December. Dry grass, cold concrete, distant cedar. 4 steps, 5. My hand reached out for the door handle. Then I stopped. I stood there with my hand on the cold metal, feeling the weight of the door against my palm, ready to push it open and walk out into the night. But something held me back. Not fear, not doubt, not regret. Something else. I thought about this morning driving down Highway 290 in my truck, listening to Ruth's voice message one more time. I thought about walking through the side entrance past the kitchen. I thought about the handwritten name card with wet ink. I thought about being deleted from family photos. I thought about sitting alone at table 9. I thought about Marlene telling me not to interfere. I thought about my $2,000 envelope being returned. I thought about Griffin's speech thanking everyone except me. I thought about Leonie telling me to leave because I was old. I thought about the cake smashing into my face. I thought about the word parasite, and I realized I didn't want to leave. Not yet. I wanted to be there when they found out. Not to watch them hurt, not to gloat, not for revenge, but to let them see me. To let them see that I was still here. Still standing. That after everything they'd done to make me invisible, to erase me, to push me out, I was still present, still witnessing, still existing. I let go of the door handle. I turned around, and I walked back down the hallway past the flickering fluorescent light toward the door that led back into the banquet room. Back to table 9. Back to the celebration of a house that no longer existed. I wanted to be there when they found out. Not to watch them hurt, but to let them see me standing tall one last time. I pulled the side door open and stepped back into the noise. The music hit me first, then the voices, then the smell of food and perfume and champagne. The banquet room was alive with celebration. No one had noticed I was gone. I walked through the room toward table 9. Some guests glanced at me. A few stared. I was the man who'd had a wedding cake smashed into his face 20 minutes ago. Now I was walking calmly back to my seat as if nothing had happened. There was still frosting on my collar. I could feel it, sticky, cold. I didn't wipe it away. I reached table 9 and sat down. I placed both hands flat on the white tablecloth. The fabric was cool and smooth under my palms. I looked toward the center of the room. Griffin and Leonie were on the dance floor, their first dance as husband and wife. They moved together under the chandeliers, her white dress spinning his arms around her waist. They looked happy. They looked perfect. They had no idea. I glanced to my left. 3 tables away, Walter sat with the bride's family. He was looking in my direction. Not obviously. Not so anyone else would notice. But I saw him. Our eyes met. I nodded once. Slightly. Just a small movement of my head. Walter's expression didn't change. But something in his eyes shifted. Understanding, recognition, confirmation. He knew. Without words, without explanation, without needing to ask. He knew I'd made the call. He knew I'd sent the email. He knew it was done. 40 years of friendship. You learn to read each other without speaking. Walter nodded back, even smaller than mine, almost invisible. Then he turned back to his table, picked up his water glass, and took a drink. I sat at table 9, hands on the white tablecloth, and waited. Before I tell you what happens when they discover the truth, are you still with me? Comment A if you think they'll find out tonight, or B if they won't know until tomorrow, and add one short reason, so I can see how you're reading this. Quick note, what follows includes some recreated details for narrative purposes, but the lesson is what matters. The music changed. The first dance ended. Applause filled the room. Griffin and Leonie broke apart, smiling, waving to the crowd. Then Leonie began moving through the tables again. I watched her work the room. She was good at it, confident, practiced. She stopped at each table with a smile, a laugh, a story, and everywhere she stopped, I heard her voice. "We just ordered furniture from Austin last week," she said at table 4. Her voice carried clearly across the room. "Custom pieces, they're being delivered next month." Ordered from Austin, custom pieces. I added it to my mental list, the list no one else could see. I'm moving in at the end of the month, Leonie continued at table 6. December 31st, new house for the new year, end of the month. December 31st, I added that too. 2-car garage, she said at table 8. Plenty of space for both our cars. Griffin's truck and my sedan. 2-car garage, both cars. Every word she said I added to the list. Every detail, every plan, every dream built on money that was no longer there. Built on a house that was no longer theirs. Built on a foundation that had collapsed at 6:41 p.m. I looked down at my watch. The face glowed faintly in the dim light. 7 p.m. 19 minutes since I'd sent the email. 19 minutes since I'd confirmed the cancellation. 19 minutes since everything had changed, and they still didn't know. I wondered what time real estate agents worked until. Would Faye call them tonight? Would she wait until morning? Would she send an email, a text? How long until they knew? Leonie was still moving through the tables, still telling her story, still building her future out loud for everyone to hear. "It's everything we've been planning for," she said at table 10. "Everything we've worked for. Everything we've saved for. Everything they'd worked for." I sat at table 9 with my hands on the white tablecloth, with frosting still on my collar, with the receipt still folded over my heart, and I listened to her describe a future that no longer existed. Custom furniture from Austin, moving in December 31st. 2-car garage, new house for the new year. Every word a plan. Every plan built on a foundation of sand. And the tide had already come in. The foundation was already gone. She just didn't know it yet. I looked at my watch again. 7:05 p.m. 24 minutes. How much longer? Leonie reached table 12 near the far wall. She was laughing, gesturing her hands, moving as she described the house. The kitchen, the backyard, the view of the hills. I could hear every word, and I wondered when she finds out. When Faye calls or emails or somehow tells them that the contract has been canceled, that the house is no longer theirs, that the deposit is being returned, that everything they've been celebrating tonight is built on nothing, will she remember this moment? Will she remember standing at table 12 describing the kitchen? She'll never cook in the backyard. She'll never sit in the view she'll never see. Will she remember the words, custom furniture and end of the month, and everything we've worked for? I looked at my watch one more time, 7:10 p.m. I wondered what time real estate agents worked until. I wondered whether Faye would call them tonight or wait until morning. I wondered how long I would have to sit here at table 9 listening to them celebrate a house that no longer existed before the truth finally arrived. Leonie was still talking about the end of the month. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. I felt the vibration in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Faye Mercer. Again. I stood up from table 9 and walked back to the hallway. The same hallway. The same flickering fluorescent light. The same emergency exit propped open at the far end. I answered. Eugene, Faye said. I've processed the cancellation confirmation. The system is updating now. Thank you, I said. There's one more thing I need to tell you, she continued. Her voice was careful, professional. Another client raised interest in that Sunnyvale Creek property last week. They've been waiting to see if it would become available. If you confirm the cancellation is final, they can take over the contract in the next few days. I stood in the hallway, phone pressed to my ear, looking at the slice of dark parking lot through the emergency exit. Everyone needs a place to live, I said. Let them buy it. I'll process the transfer paperwork tonight, Faye said. Eugene, it's done, I said. I ended the call. The house was officially someone else's now. Not just canceled, not just returned. Already moving to the next buyer, the next family, the next dream. Griffin and Leonie's future was becoming someone else's present. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked back into the banquet room. I sat down at table 9, placed my hands on the white tablecloth, and waited. 5 minutes later, Walter appeared. He didn't ask permission this time. He just pulled out the chair beside mine and sat down. His movements were careful, deliberate. He leaned close so his voice wouldn't carry. "We may say, email processed," he said quietly. "I just confirmed with the escrow office. Contract officially canceled at 7:22 p.m. Your deposit will be returned to your account in 3 to 5 business days." I nodded. "Are you okay?" Walter asked. I looked across the room toward the head table. Griffin sat there beside his new wife, laughing at something someone said. He looked happy. He looked like a man at the beginning of his life. "I'm okay," I said. "Just sad." Walter waited. Not triumphant, I continued. Just sad. I wanted him to have a house and a good wife, but I can't buy both at the same time. Walter studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and walked back toward his table. As he walked, I noticed him pull out his phone. He made a brief call. His voice was low, but in the momentary gap in the music, I heard fragments. "Yes, Eugene Morgan, Sunnyvale Creek property, confirmed at 7:22 p.m. He was finishing paperwork, confirming details, speaking loud enough to be professional, but not quite quiet enough to be private. At table 10, 3 feet from where Walter stood making his call, an older woman turned her head. She'd heard something. I saw her lean toward her husband, whisper something. The husband frowned, looked toward table 9, toward me. Walter ended his call and returned to table 1, but the whisper had started. I watched it spread. Table 10 to table 11. A question passed between 2 guests. Then table 11 to table 12. Someone pulled out their phone. A brief call. A name mentioned, Faye Mercer. I knew that guest. I'd seen her earlier. She was a real estate agent herself. Someone who would know Faye. Someone who could call and ask directly. She dialed. She waited. She spoke quietly into the phone. Then her expression changed. She looked across the room. Not at the bride and groom. At me. She ended the call. Leaned toward the person beside her. Whispered. The question was spreading faster now. Table 12 to table 13. 13 to 14. I heard fragments. Pieces of conversation floating across the room between the music. Wait, who actually paid for that house? I thought they said they saved for it. But someone just told me it was the father. The groom's father, the one at table 9. The one she... Yes, that one. Canceled tonight. The whisper reached table 8. Then table 7. Then table 6. Guests were turning now. Not obviously, not all at once. But one by one heads were turning. Eyes were finding table 9. Finding me. The man who'd been invisible all day was suddenly visible. The man who'd entered through the side door was suddenly worth looking at. The man who'd had a cake smashed in his face and been called a parasite was suddenly the subject of questions. Not contempt, questions. At table 5, a woman leaned forward, staring at me with open curiosity. Not judgment, not pity. Curiosity. At table 4, 2 men were having an intense, whispered conversation, glancing between me and the head table where Leonie sat, still smiling, still celebrating, still completely unaware. At table 3, someone had pulled out their phone and appeared to be reading something. Probably a text from the real estate agent friend. Probably confirmation of what they'd heard. The questions were getting closer to table 1, closer to the bride's family, closer to the truth, reaching the people who needed to hear it most. I sat at table 9 with my hands on the white tablecloth, watching the room transform around me. Watching the invisible become visible. Watching the erased become present. Watching the dismissed become central. For the first time all day, people were looking at me, not with contempt, not with dismissal, not with the blank eyes of someone looking past furniture. They were looking at me with questions. Who was this man? What had actually happened? Who really paid for that house? And most importantly, why had no one mentioned him until now? I sat at table 9 watching the eyes of guests starting to turn toward me. Not with contempt. For the first time today, it was a question. The questions were spreading. But Leonie hadn't heard them yet. She was still at the center of the room, still holding court, still describing the house with animated gestures and that bright, confident smile, still celebrating. Then the woman in the blue dress leaned close to Leonie's ear. I watched from table 9. I saw the exact moment the woman whispered. I saw Leonie's head tilt slightly to hear better. I saw her smile stay fixed on her face. Then I saw the smile freeze, not disappear, freeze, like it had been painted on, and suddenly the paint stopped being wet and became hard and fixed and false. Leonie pulled back slightly, looked at the woman. Her mouth opened. What? I couldn't hear her from table 9, but I could read her lips. The woman in the blue dress leaned in again, whispered more. Leonie's eyes went wide. What do you mean, canceled? Leonie said, louder this time. Loud enough that I heard it, loud enough that nearby guests turned to look. The woman said something else. Quiet, apologetic. Leonie shook her head. Are you sure the house on Sunnyvale Creek? The woman nodded. Leonie asked again, her voice rising sharp now, cutting through the music. Are you absolutely sure? People were staring now. The conversations around Leonie had stopped. Guests were watching with open curiosity, concern, confusion. Leonie pulled her phone from somewhere in her dress. She swiped through screens with shaking hands. Found a contact. Pressed call. She held the phone to her ear. I watched her stand in the middle of the banquet room under the chandeliers in her white dress, with her phone pressed to her ear, waiting. Then someone answered. Faye, Leonie said. Her voice was strained, tight. It's Leonie. I need you to tell me what's happening with our house. Silence. She was listening. Then her face changed, not slowly, all at once, like a curtain being ripped down. The color drained from her cheeks. Her mouth opened slightly. Her eyes, I could see them even from table 9, went from confusion to shock to something else. Something hollow. Tonight, she said into the phone. He canceled it tonight. More listening. Her hand came up to her mouth. His name, she said. Just his name, not Griffin's. She was shaking her head now. Small movements. Disbelief. The entire deposit. Her voice cracked. Everything. I watched her face change every second. Watched her process what she was hearing. Watched her understand. She just lost the house. Griffin just lost the house. I just lost 30 years. Leonie ended the call. She stood there holding her phone, staring at nothing. The banquet room noise continued around her, music, laughter, conversation, but she was completely still. A statue in a white dress. Then she moved. She scanned the room. Found Griffin. He was at the head table talking to one of his groomsmen, laughing at something. Leonie walked toward him. Fast. Urgent. Her heels clicking on the floor. She grabbed his arm. Griffin looked up surprised. Started to smile. Saw her face. The smile died. Leonie pulled him. Not gently. She pulled him toward the corner of the banquet room, away from the head table, away from the guests, to a space near the wall where the music was slightly quieter. I couldn't hear them. Not from table 9. But I could see everything. Leonie was talking, fast, her hands moving, her face intense. Griffin was listening. His expression confused at first, then concerned, then something else. I watched my son's face as Leonie told him. I watched him shake his head. Say something. Ask a question. I watched Leonie answer. Watched her point across the room. Toward table 9. Toward me. Griffin looked. Our eyes met across the banquet room. Then Leonie said something else. Something that made Griffin's head snap back to her. His mouth opened. What? I could read his lips from here. Leonie was nodding, emphatic, certain, and I watched my son's face change. Not with anger, not with shock, not with the immediate emotional response you'd expect. With understanding, slow, painful understanding. His eyes went distant for a moment. Calculating, processing. Then they widened. All of it, he said. I could hear him now. His voice carried in a gap in the music. His entire pension. Leonie nodded. Griffin's hand came up to his face, covered his mouth. His eyes were still wide. He gave us everything, Griffin said. His voice was quiet now, stunned. And he didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he was thinking, and we called him a parasite, and we excluded him from photos, and we returned his cash gift, and we told him to leave early, and we smashed a cake in his face. I watched my son realize what he had done, what his wife had done, what they had all done. I watched him understand, really understand for the first time, that his father had given him everything. Not part of his savings, not a portion, everything. The entire pension from 40 years of welding, every dollar saved, every penny invested carefully over decades, gone, given to him, and he hadn't known. Not because I hadn't told him. I had. I'd planned to tell him today. I'd wanted it to be a surprise, a gift, a gesture that said, I believe in your future. I believe in you. But they'd made it impossible to tell him with joy. They'd made it impossible to tell him with love. They'd made it impossible to give with dignity. So instead, I'd taken it back. Griffin's eyes found mine again across the banquet room. This time, he didn't look away. He stared at me. His face was pale. His expression was broken, not angry, broken, because he finally understood what his father had tried to do, and what had been done to his father in return. I watched my son's face change, not with anger, but with understanding. He realized what I had done. Too late, but he realized. Griffin stood in the corner with his wife, his face pale with understanding. But the revelation wasn't over yet. The man at table 7 stood up. I didn't know his name. He was someone's friend, someone's +1, a guest I'd never met. But he was the one who'd called Faye earlier, the real estate agent who knew how to ask the right questions. He stood up with his phone still in his hand, and he spoke. Not shouting, but loud enough, clear enough, projecting his voice the way someone does when they want to be heard, but don't want to seem like they're trying to be heard. I just asked the agent, he said to the people at his table, but his voice carried. To table 6, to table 8, to table 9 where I sat. That house was in the groom's father's name. The conversations around him stopped. People turned to listen. And the contract was canceled, he continued. Tonight. The music was still playing, but beneath it I could hear the silence spreading, table by table, like a wave moving through the room. Someone at table 8 spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. Canceled tonight. The man at table 7 nodded. About an hour ago. The agent confirmed it. The murmurs began. low at first, then louder. Wait, the father paid for it. The one they... The cake. Oh my God. Leonie was still standing in the middle of the banquet room, where she'd been when she got the news. Frozen. Her white dress bright under the chandeliers. Her face was pale. Her eyes were searching. They found me. She stared at me across the 50 feet of banquet room floor. Stared at the man sitting at table 9 in the back corner near the kitchen door. The man with frosting still visible on his collar. The man who'd entered through the side entrance. The man who'd been excluded from photos. The man whose cash gift had been returned. The man who hadn't been mentioned in the thank you speech. The man who'd had a cake smashed in his face and been called a parasite. The man who'd paid for everything. And as Leonie stared at me, the entire banquet room followed her gaze. One by one, table by table, head by head, 180 pairs of eyes turned toward table 9. Toward me. The music was still playing, but no one was listening to it anymore. The celebration was still technically happening, but no one was celebrating. Everyone was looking at the 68-year-old man in the old Navy suit, sitting alone at the table in the back corner. For the first time today, I wasn't invisible. I didn't move. I didn't stand up. I didn't speak. I just sat there with my hands flat on the white tablecloth, looking back at them all. Looking back at my son, who stood in the corner with his hand over his mouth, his eyes wide with realization. Looking back at my daughter-in-law, who stood in the middle of the room in her white dress, her face a mixture of shock and something else. Fear, maybe, or shame, or anger, or all three. Looking back at the 180 guests who had witnessed my humiliation and were now witnessing something else. The truth. And in that moment, with all those eyes on me, I remembered something. Not something from today. Something from 2 years ago. A hospital room. Yellow light through the window. The smell of antiseptic and dying. Ruth in the bed, her hand cold in mine, her voice weak but clear. Shout, if Griffin is not grateful, she had said, don't tell the truth too soon. Wait for the right moment. I had listened to that message this morning, in my truck, before I drove to the wedding. I'd played it from her old phone, the one I kept charged in my desk drawer. Her voice preserved in digital amber, giving me advice she'd known I would need. Wait for the right moment. I had waited. For 3 months since signing the escrow contract in Faye's office. 3 months of keeping the secret. 3 months of planning the surprise. All day today, I had waited. Through the side entrance. Through the handwritten name card. Through being excluded from photos. Through Marlene's warnings. Through the returned gift. Through Griffin's speech. Through Leonie's condescension. Through the restroom revelation. Through it all. Until 6:41 p.m. when I'd made the phone call. When I'd sent the email. When I'd taken it all back. And now, at 8:45 p.m., the truth had spread through the wedding like fire through dry grass. Not because I'd announced it. Not because I'd confronted them. Not because I'd demanded recognition. But because the truth had found its own way out. That was the right moment. Ruth had told me to wait. I had waited. And the moment had arrived on its own without me forcing it. But when they had shown me exactly who they were, when they had proven Ruth's prophecy correct, when they had demonstrated that they were not grateful, I promised you, Ruth. I waited for the right moment, and this was it. Not because I wanted them to hurt. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted to humiliate them the way they'd humiliated me, but because you told me to wait. Because you knew. Because you understood even 2 years ago when you were dying in that hospital bed that this moment would come. That I would need to know when to act. That I would need permission to protect myself. You gave me that permission. You told me to wait. And I did. I sat at table 9 with 180 pairs of eyes on me, and I thought about Ruth's wisdom. About her understanding. About her love that extended beyond her death, beyond her life, into this moment. She had known. She had known that if Griffin was grateful, I should tell him right away. The gift would be received with joy. The sacrifice would be honored. The love would be recognized. But if he was not grateful, If they were not grateful, then I should wait. Wait for them to show their true faces. Wait for them to reveal who they really were. Wait for the right moment, and then act. That was the right moment. Not because I wanted them to hurt, but because I promised Ruth I would wait. Today was the right moment, and now that the moment had come, I had to finish it. She walked toward table 9. Leonie crossed the banquet room floor in her white dress, the dress that had looked so pristine and perfect this morning, and now looked rumpled, stained with champagne at the hem wilted under the lights. She walked slowly, not with the confidence she'd had all day, not with the sharp brightness, with something else, something heavy. She reached my table and stopped. I looked up at her. She looked down at me. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying or was about to cry. Her voice when she spoke was different, smaller, the sharp edge gone. "Dad," she said. I didn't respond. "I'm sorry," she continued. Can you call the agent back? Can we talk again?" I looked at her. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, not with triumph. Just tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. "The contract is canceled," I said. My voice was calm, flat. "It cannot be reversed." "But there must be," Leonie started. "There isn't," I said. "Oh, please," she said. Her voice broke slightly. "We need that house. We've planned everything. The furniture is ordered. We've told everyone, please." I looked at her standing there in her wedding dress, begging for the house she'd told everyone she'd bought herself. The house she'd bragged about. The house she'd used to show her independence. The house she'd claimed as proof of her discipline and success. And I said the words that had been building in me all day. Building for months, maybe. Building since the moment I signed that check and gave them everything. The parasites shouldn't nurture others. The words came out quietly, calmly. Not loud, not firm, not angry. Just simple. Like reading a number off a construction drawing. Like stating a fact. Like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. It left my mouth lightly. As breath. As truth. I didn't know I would say it until it rang out. But once I said it, I knew it was right. It was the simplest truth I'd ever said. Lanny's face went white. She stepped back as if I'd struck her. "What?" she started. But I had nothing more to say. The words had said everything. The truth was out. Complete. Final. She stood there for another 3 seconds. Then she turned and walked away. I watched her go back to the center of the room, where guests were still standing, still watching, still processing what had happened. She found someone, a friend, a bridesmaid, someone who pulled her into a hug, and I watched my son. Griffin had been standing near the corner. He'd seen Leonie approach me. He'd seen her beg. He'd seen me refuse. He'd heard what I said, I could tell by his face. Now he was moving. Not toward me, not toward his wife, toward Brent Caldwell, Leonie's father. The man I'd heard in the restroom. The man who'd talked about collateral and business loans and convincing Griffin to sign. Griffin walked up to Brent near the bar. Brent was holding a drink, talking to someone. He looked relaxed, unconcerned, like none of this had anything to do with him. Griffin stopped in front of him, said something. I couldn't hear it from table 9. But I saw Brent's expression change, saw confusion cross his face. Griffin said something else, sharper this time, pointed. Brent set down his drink. Then Griffin said something that made Brent's face go still. And I knew that Griffin had just asked about the restroom conversation, because Brent's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. He said something, defensive, denying. But Griffin shook his head, said something else. I saw him gesture toward table 10, the table that had been close to the restrooms, the table where someone had overheard. Brent couldn't deny it. His face changed, guilt, or something close to it. And I watched my son's face as understanding crashed over him. Not the first understanding, not the realization about the money, That had already happened. This was different. This was the realization that it had all been planned. That he hadn't just failed to notice his father's sacrifice. He'd been actively manipulated, used, positioned like a chess piece to give the Caldwell family access to money they couldn't get themselves. "Did you know?" Griffin said. I could hear him now. His voice was loud enough to carry, loud enough that nearby guests turned to watch. "In the restroom, did you know it was my father's money?" Brent opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Was I just a way to get to his pension?" Griffin said. The words hung in the air. Brent didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. Griffin stood there for a long moment. Then he turned away from Brent. Turned away from his father-in-law. Turned away from the man who'd planned to use my money as collateral for a business venture my son had never been told about. And for the first time all day, Griffin looked at things clearly. Not at me, not yet, but at them. At Brent. At Marlene, who was standing nearby, who'd told me not to interfere in their financial decisions while planning to use my money for theirs. At the Caldwell family, who'd welcomed him so warmly, who'd treated him so well, who'd made him feel so accepted. And I could see him understanding. Not all at once. Not completely. But beginning to see that the warmth had conditions, that the welcome had a purpose, that the acceptance came with a price his father had been paying without him knowing. I watched my son's face as he looked at Brent Caldwell. For the first time today, Griffin was looking in the right direction. I didn't expect him to come alone. For the first hour after the revelation, Griffin had been surrounded by Leonie, by her parents, by guests offering useless comfort. I'd watched from table 9 as the circle around him tightened, as voices rose and fell in waves of explanation and anger. I'd watched, and I'd waited, and I'd known that whatever happened next would happen without my participation. I was done reaching out. But at 9:30, the crowd around table 1 finally dispersed. Marlene Caldwell walked toward the exit with her phone pressed to her ear. Brent followed, his face the color of old concrete. Leonie stayed at the table, hunched over her own phone, typing furiously, and Griffin stood up. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked across the banquet hall floor, past the dessert station, where the ruined cake still sat on its stand, past the dance floor, where someone had turned off the lights, past table after table of guests who fell silent as he passed. He walked toward table 9, toward me. I didn't move. I didn't stand or wave or give him any indication that I welcomed the approach. I just watched my son cross the distance he'd put between us 30 years ago, one slow step at a time. When he reached the table, he stood there for a moment, his hand resting on the back of the empty chair beside me. The chair where Ruth should have been sitting. The chair where Walter had sat earlier when he'd come to check on me. "Can I sit?" Griffin's voice was quiet, hoarse. I looked up at him. His tie was loosened. His jacket was off. His face was pale except for 2 red patches high on his cheeks, the same patches he'd gotten as a boy when he was trying not to cry. I nodded once. He sat down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Around us, the reception continued in muted tones. Guests were leaving now, one couple at a time, gathering coats and purses and whispering to each other as they headed for the doors. The DJ had packed up an hour ago. The bartender was wiping down the counter with slow, methodical strokes. December 14th, 2024, 9:32 p.m. My son sat beside me and neither of us knew what to say. Finally, Griffin broke the silence. "I didn't know." 3 words. I waited. "I didn't know you used it all," he continued. His voice cracked on the word all. "The pension, the savings. I thought..." He stopped, swallowed, started again. "I thought you were just helping with the down payment. That's what Leonie told me. 20, maybe 30,000. I didn't know it was everything." I kept my hands flat on the table. Didn't speak. "Dad, I'm sorry." He turned to look at me directly. His eyes were wet. I didn't know. I let you sit here alone all day. I let her. His voice broke completely. He looked away, blinking hard. I let her do that to you, and I didn't stop it. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between us like something physical, something that required a response. I thought about Ruth's message, the one she'd left for me 3 years ago, the one I'd played in the car on the way to the reception this morning. Wait for the right moment. This wasn't the right moment for forgiveness. Maybe that sounds cruel. Maybe it sounds like I was punishing my son when he'd finally found the courage to apologize. But here's what I knew sitting in that banquet hall at 9:30 on a Saturday night. Forgiveness isn't a transaction. You don't say sorry and immediately receive absolution like you're swiping a credit card. Real forgiveness takes time. It takes watching someone actually change, not just regret what they've done. Griffin was sorry tonight because the truth had embarrassed him in front of 200 guests. Would he still be sorry next week, next month? When the shame faded and life returned to normal, I didn't know. And until I knew, I wasn't ready to forgive. So instead of saying it's okay, instead of saying I forgive you, I did something simpler. I reached over and put my hand on Griffin's shoulder. Just for a second. 1 second of contact, father and son, my palm heavy on his jacket, 40 years of welding calluses against expensive fabric. Then I pulled away. You should go back to your wife, I said quietly. She needs you right now. Griffin stared at me. Dad, go on, I said. It's your wedding day. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to push for more. But something in my face must have told him that more wasn't available. Not tonight. He stood up slowly. Can I call you? He asked. Tomorrow, I looked up at my son, 28 years old, married, humiliated, lost. If you want to, I said. It wasn't yes. It wasn't no. It was the truth. If Griffin wanted to rebuild what we'd lost, he could try. But the effort would have to come from him. I was done carrying the relationship alone. He nodded. Once. Then he walked back across the banquet hall toward table 1 where Leonie sat with her head in her hands. I watched him go. Watched him sit down beside his wife. Watched her lift her head and say something sharp that made him flinch. I'd given Griffin 30 years of my life. My pension, my savings, my presence at every milestone, even when I wasn't wanted. I'd given him everything a father could give. And tonight, for the first time, I'd given him something else, the space to decide who he wanted to be. Not the son Leonie had shaped, not the son Marlene expected. Just Griffin, my son. The choice was his now. At 9:45 p.m., I stood up from table 9. Walter caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. Then I walked out of the Rosewood Ballroom into the December night, leaving my son's wedding behind me. Leaving the humiliation and the anger and the revelation behind me. Going home to the house I hadn't sold. Going home alone. And for the first time in 3 years, maybe for the first time since Ruth died, I felt something that wasn't grief or rage or bitter determination. I felt free. I stood up from table 9 for the last time. The freedom I'd felt walking out of the Rosewood Ballroom had stayed with me through the drive back to Sage Creek Ranch, through the walk across the parking lot, through the moment I'd stepped back inside to collect my coat. But now, standing beside the empty chair where I'd sat for 11 hours, I felt something else too: exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones and makes every movement feel like you're wading through deep water. Walter saw me reach for my coat and crossed the room in 3 long strides. His face was drawn, the lines around his eyes deeper than they'd been this morning. 11 hours of watching his friend be humiliated and orchestrating revenge had taken its toll on him too. "Do you need me to go with you?" he asked quietly. I looked at him. Walter Hewitt, 65 years old, retired attorney, the only person who'd stood beside me today when everyone else had turned away. He'd done more than enough. "Thank you," I said. "You've done enough." He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Call me tomorrow if you need anything." He put his hand on my shoulder, a brief firm grip, then let go. I watched him walk back toward his table where his wife Margaret was gathering her purse. Then I turned and looked around the banquet room one last time. Most of the guests had left. Maybe 40 people remained scattered across the tables in small clusters, voices low and urgent. At table 1, Leonie sat with her head bent over her phone, typing with sharp, angry jabs. Marlene Caldwell stood near the exit doors, still on a call, pacing in tight circles. Brent sat slumped at table 1, a glass of whiskey in front of him, staring at nothing. The decorations that had looked elegant at noon now looked tired. The white orchids in their crystal vases were wilting under the heat of the overhead lights, petals browning at the edges. The silk draping along the walls sagged in places where the pins had come loose. And near the leg of table 9, where Leonie had ground her heel after smashing the cake into my face, there was still a smear of buttercream on the hardwood floor. White frosting mixed with crumbs ground into the grain. No one had cleaned it. I put on my coat slowly, one arm at a time, buttoning it from bottom to top the way I'd done every winter morning for 40 years before heading to the shipyard. My pickup truck was waiting in the far corner of the parking lot, where I'd parked it at 11:30 this morning. 11.5 hours ago. It felt like a lifetime. I started toward the side exit, the same door I'd entered through this morning, the one that led directly to the parking lot instead of through the main lobby. I was halfway across the banquet room when I heard footsteps behind me. "Dad." Griffin's voice. I stopped but didn't turn around. Not yet. "Dad, wait." The footsteps came closer. I turned. Griffin stood 3 feet away, his tie completely undone, now hanging loose around his neck. His jacket was somewhere else. His white dress shirt was wrinkled, the collar unbuttoned. He looked younger than 28. He looked like the boy who used to wait up for me when I worked late shifts, who'd fall asleep on the couch and wake up when he heard my truck in the driveway. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Home," I said. Griffin's face twisted. "Where is your home now?" It was a fair question. The house on Sunnyvale Creek, the house I'd paid for with my entire pension, the house I'd signed over to him and Leonie as a wedding gift, that house was gone. Cancelled at 6:41 p.m., confirmed cancelled at 7:22. I had nowhere to go except the small apartment I'd been renting month to month for the past 6 months, the one with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who smoked on the balcony at 6 a.m. I looked at my son. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I have $180,000 that will be back in my account in a few days. I'll find it." Griffin flinched at the number. 180,000. My entire pension. The amount Leonie had told him was just a down payment contribution. The amount he'd let her spend without ever asking me directly if it was true. "Can I?" He stopped, swallowed, started again. "Can you let me call?" I looked at my son for a long moment. 28 years old, married, lost, trying to find his way back to something that might have been broken too long to fix. Maybe it was fixable. Maybe it wasn't. But I was too tired tonight to figure out which. "Okay," I said. "But not tonight." Griffin nodded. Once. Sharp. Like he was afraid if he moved too much, I'd take it back. "Thank you," he whispered. I turned and walked toward the side exit. Behind me, I could hear the low murmur of voices, the clink of glasses being cleared, the rustle of coats being gathered. The sounds of a wedding reception winding down after the celebration had collapsed. I pushed open the side door and stepped out into the December night. The cold air hit my face like a slap, sharp and clean, after 11 hours of recycled air conditioning. The parking lot stretched out in front of me half empty, now cars scattered under the yellow glow of the streetlights. My pickup truck sat in the far corner right where I'd left it at 11:30 this morning. I'd walked through this door 11.5 hours ago, wearing my best suit, carrying a wedding card with $2,000 cash inside, ready to watch my son get married. I'd walked in as a father who'd given everything. I walked out as a man who'd taken it back. The same door. The same Eugene Morgan, 68 years old, retired welder widower. But everything had changed. The parking lot was quiet. The noise from inside the banquet hall, voices, music, clinking glasses, had faded the moment the side door closed behind me. Now there was only the sound of my footsteps on asphalt, the distant hum of highway traffic, and the cold December wind moving through the live oaks that lined the property. I walked across the lot toward the far corner where I'd parked 11.5 hours ago. Most of the cars were gone now. A few remained near the entrance, Walter's Lexus, a handful of others belonging to guests who'd stayed to witness the aftermath. But the corner where I'd parked was empty except for my truck. I'd chosen that spot deliberately this morning, far from the entrance, away from the luxury sedans and SUVs that would fill the lot later. A spot where my 2009 Ford F-150 wouldn't look out of place, wouldn't draw attention, wouldn't remind anyone that the father of the groom was different from everyone else in attendance. The truck sat under a broken streetlight, half in shadow. My old F-150 sat under a broken streetlight, half in shadow. Still there. Still mine. I put my hand on the hood. The metal was cold, almost freezing. The day's heat had bled away hours ago, leaving only December night. I traced my fingers along the edge where the paint had chipped, feeling the rough texture of rust and bare metal underneath. Familiar, solid, mine. The air out here smelled different from inside. No jasmine, no orchids, no expensive perfume. Just dry grass and earth and the faint scent of wood smoke from somewhere far off. Clean air. Real air. I took out my phone. The screen lit up bright in the darkness, and I scrolled through my messages until I found the one I'd saved 3 years ago. Ruth's last voice message. I'd listened to it this morning on the drive to the ranch, sitting in this same truck in the parking lot of a gas station, trying to steady my nerves before walking into my son's wedding. Now I played it again. Ruth's voice filled the quiet parking lot, thin and tired from the cancer, but still clear, still her. Still the woman who'd known me better than anyone. Eugene, darling, if you're listening to this, it means you're trying to decide something about Griffin. I know you. You'll want to help him, even if he doesn't deserve it. So here's what I want you to remember. If he's grateful, if he shows you respect, then help him as much as you can. But if he's not grateful, don't tell the truth too soon. Wait for the right moment. You'll know when it is. The message ended. I stood beside my truck in the cold December night and looked up at the sky. No stars visible here, too much light pollution from the ranch and the highway. But somewhere up there beyond the clouds and the glow they were burning. I spoke to the darkness, to Ruth, to the memory of the woman who'd spent 33 years teaching me when to fight and when to wait. I waited, darling, I said quietly. I waited for the right moment. The words hung in the air for a second, then disappeared into the wind. I opened the truck door and climbed inside. The cab smelled like coffee and dust and old leather. I sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see the banquet hall in the distance, lit up like a beacon. Inside that building, my son was sitting beside his wife, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his wedding day. Inside that building, guests were whispering about what they'd witnessed. Inside that building, my place at table 9 sat empty. I took out my phone again and scrolled to Faye Mercer's number. She answered on the second ring. Eugene. Her voice was surprised. It's late. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. I have a question. Do you remember the small house on Elm Street in Wimberley, the one with the front porch looking at the hills? There was a pause. The yellow one, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, needs some work. That's the one. It's still on the market, Faye said. Been sitting empty for 6 months. Why? How much? 185,000. I did the math in my head. 180,000 from the cancelled contract. 2,000 from the wedding gift I'd tried to give Griffin, the envelope Marlene had returned to me at the reception. 182,000 total. Close enough. I want to schedule a viewing, I said. Next week. Faye was quiet for a moment. Then, Eugene, did you cancel the Sunnyvale Creek contract? Yes. Good, she said simply. I'll set up the viewing. Monday at 10. Monday at 10. I hung up. For a long moment I sat in the truck cab, looking at the banquet hall lights in the distance. Behind those lights was everything I'd tried to build for 30 years. A relationship with my son, a place in his life, a role in his future. I'd given Griffin everything I had, my time, my money, my presence at every milestone, even when I wasn't wanted. And tonight I'd taken back the one thing I could still control. Not out of cruelty. Not even out of anger, not anymore. Out of necessity. Out of the understanding that sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes it means stepping back and letting them decide who they want to be. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life loud in the quiet parking lot, the familiar rumble of a 15-year-old truck that still had miles left in it. I put it in drive. I drove toward the parking lot exit, tires crunching on gravel and then smooth on asphalt. Behind me were the banquet hall lights, bright and artificial, illuminating a celebration that had collapsed. Ahead was the Texas highway on a December night, dark and open, leading away from Sage Creek Ranch and toward Wimberley and Austin and whatever came next. I reached the exit. I turned onto the highway. I didn't look back. The highway had led me home. Not to the apartment I'd been renting, not to the house on Sunnyvale Creek, but here, to Wimberley, to the small yellow house on Elm Street with the front porch that looked out over the Texas hills. The porch was quiet. It was late December now, 2 weeks after the wedding, and the air had turned cold. Cold enough that I needed a jacket in the mornings. Cold enough that my coffee stayed hot longer. I sat in an old wooden chair I'd brought from my apartment. Beside it was a small folding table with my coffee pot and a single mug. That was all I had on the porch. All I needed. Inside wasn't much fuller. A bed. A couch someone had left curbside that I'd cleaned. A card table. Boxes still unpacked in the corner. I'd signed the contract 10 days ago. Moved in 6 days ago. The house needed work. The faucet dripped. One window didn't close properly. The back steps needed replacing. But the bones were good. Solid foundation. Good roof. And the porch was perfect. From here I could see hills rolling away and layers of brown and green dotted with cedar and oak. No neighbors visible, just land and sky. Mornings brought deer through the property. Nights brought coyote songs from somewhere far off. I thought about what Griffin and Leonie had lost. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage. Furniture from the Austin showroom. The neighborhood where property values climbed every year. Everything they'd planned. Then I looked back at my porch. 1 chair, 1 table, 1 cup of coffee, 1 view of the Texas hills. I lacked nothing. A squirrel ran across the roof above me, claws scrabbling on shingles, and I smiled. No orchestra, no orchids, no champagne. Just a squirrel on a roof and wind through trees and cheap coffee I'd made myself in a pot I'd owned for 20 years. This was enough. My phone rang. Griffin's name on the screen. I'd given him permission to call 3 weeks ago in the hallway outside the Rosewood Ballroom. He hadn't called that next day. For 2 weeks silence. Then 3 days ago he had. We'd talked for 5 minutes. Careful conversation, both of us testing frozen ground. Now he was calling again, I answered. Dad. Griffin's voice was quiet. Son. Silence. I waited. Where are you? He asked finally. Wimberley. The house on Elm Street. Yes. Are you okay? I'm okay. More silence. Through the phone I heard traffic. He was outside somewhere, maybe on lunch break. I know I have no right to ask anything anymore, Griffin said. His voice was tight. But I want you to know I understand now. What you did. What you gave up. What she... He stopped. I understand. I looked out at the hills. A hawk circled overhead. I know you understand, I said. That's enough for now. That's enough for now. Not I forgive you. Not everything's fine. Just that's enough for now. Griffin seemed to understand. Okay, he said quietly. We talked a few more minutes. Safe topics. Weather. Christmas coming in a few days. Whether I needed anything. I told him I was fine. I'd call after the new year. He said okay. We hung up. I sat holding the phone, watching the hawk circle and dive and disappear behind the hill. I didn't know what would happen next with Griffin. Maybe we'd rebuild something. Maybe we wouldn't. Maybe in a year we'd have coffee on this porch. Maybe in a year we'd still be having 5-minute phone calls about weather. I didn't know. But I knew my son had called, and I'd answered. That was something. The sun dropped lower, turning the sky orange, then pink, then purple, then dark. I stayed on the porch. The temperature dropped and I pulled my jacket tighter, but I didn't go inside. The Texas winter stars came out one by one, then all at once filling the sky with more light than I'd seen in years. You can't see stars like this in the city. Too much light pollution. But out here, 40 minutes from Austin in the hill country, the sky opened up like someone had punched holes in black curtain and let heaven shine through. I took out my phone one more time, scrolled to Ruth's voice message. I'd listened to it the morning of the wedding, standing in the parking lot trying to find courage. I'd listened in the Sage Creek Ranch parking lot after the reception, confirming I'd kept my promise. Now I listened again. Not for guidance, not for answers, just to hear her voice. Ruth's voice, thin and tired, and still so clear. Eugene, darling, if you're listening to this, it means you're trying to decide something about Griffin. I let the message play through. When it finished, I put the phone down beside my empty coffee cup. I looked up at the Texas sky, at the stars burning bright and cold and infinite, and I said one sentence. Not to Ruth exactly, not to Griffin or Leonie or anyone living, just to the night, to the silence, to the Texas hills and the stars and the person who was gone but would never quite leave me. The day you called me a parasite, I said quietly, you lost the right to live in a house built by my sacrifice, and to you listening to my story right now, I want you to hear this. Dignity is not negotiable. For 30 years, I told myself that love meant never asking for anything in return. I gave everything I had, my time, my savings, my presence quietly without complaint, the way my father taught me a man should give. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept sacrificing, the people I loved would eventually see it, would eventually understand what it cost me. They didn't, and that was my mistake, not the giving. The giving was never wrong. The mistake was believing that love without boundaries would protect me. It didn't protect me. It just taught the people around me that I had no line they couldn't cross. When you never say no, when you absorb every insult and swallow every humiliation in the name of keeping the peace, you don't preserve the relationship. You slowly erase yourself from it. I learned that the hard way in a room full of people with frosting on my suit and the word parasite still echoing in my ears. But here's what I also learned. Reclaiming your dignity is not cruelty. It is not revenge. It is not bitterness dressed up as justice. It is simply the decision to stop teaching people that your sacrifice has no value. My daughter-in-law didn't just insult me that night. She showed me and everyone in that room the true cost of a life built on borrowed respect and someone else's money. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for another person is to let them face the full weight of their own choices. Not to destroy them, not to humiliate them, but to stop absorbing the damage so they never have to feel it. I believe God put me in that room for a reason. Not so I could win, but so I could finally stop losing myself in the name of love. Family justice is not about making people pay. It is about making sure the truth finds its way to the surface and then leaving the door open just slightly for something real to grow from the wreckage. The door is still open for my son. It may take time. It may never fully heal. But I will not close it. That is the difference between justice and revenge. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? What would you have done in my position? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories about dignity boundaries and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild, subscribe to Wise Revenge. We'll be here. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means more to me than you know. One final note. Certain details in this story have been fictionalized to protect privacy and honor the message. What matters is not the details. What matters is this: